Pox upon thee, little fellow, creeping pimp with stripe of yellow. With thy frightened, shifty glance, and thy trembling in thy stance, mind the alley's dark open mouth, mind the shadows leaning close. Pay heed to soft, careful sounds, cautious footfalls on the ground. Watch and wait, and stink with fear, for in the dark your killer's near. All right, welcome to Good Book, everyone. We are back again, and we've got another new book here to discuss and review for you. We're going to get right into it. So I'm Nick, and as always, here with Sam. Sam, how's it going?
It's going all right. Been reading books, kicking butt, taking names.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed this one, and I'm really looking forward to discussing it.
Yeah, same. Me too. Okay, so per usual, we're going to start off with a book question, and this one is a little bit connected to our discussion today. What is your sort of experience and history with the crime/detective novel genre?
The first detective novels that I read were the Hardy Boys, and it's actually how I learned to read, was reading the Hardy Boys with my dad in first grade. And I would sit. He would read it to me first, and then at a certain point, he was reading every other word, and then we were doing every other sentence, and then I was reading them. And so I've always loved those, and Nancy Drew too. It's how I learned what getting knocked unconscious means and blacking out, because that's how they end every chapter almost. It felt. Oh yeah, also a jalopy. It's just a great word, jalopy, and I think we should use it more. But yeah, I mean, I've read a lot of Agatha Christie, all that stuff. I really liked Agatha Christie for a while. I still love those shows. Recently, my favorite series in the detective genre is the Louise Penny Gamache series. If you haven't read them,
I haven't. I think you've told me about them. I haven't read them.
I've probably tried to sell you on them. Yeah, they couldn't be more different than the book we're talking about today. Gamache is this older detective in Quebec, and they center around this sleepy small town in the hills, and it's very cozy, but everybody's very human, which is something I appreciate. The characters often feel real, and they go through real things, and it's just a lot of fun. They're just really fun, and there's like over 20 books at this point, and she's still writing them. Oh. So it's not too late to hop on that train.
Man,
how about you, Nick?
You know that it's hard for me to stay away from a long ass series. So there we go. Yeah. So I actually I never really got into the Hardy Boys, but I was super into Nancy Drew.
Okay.
I love the Nancy Drew books. I'm not quite sure. I feel like maybe ended up reading one, and I remember reading The Secret of the Old Clock, which is the first one, like really vividly, and then going from there. And then I think I was just like, I was on that series, and so my daughter started reading them this year. She's read like the first 5. Yeah. And she asked me how many there were, and it's crazy, man. Like there's like 175 or something like that. So.
Oh yeah, but they're not all like originals.
Yeah. Totally.
The newer stuff from both the Hardy Boys and Nancy Drew aren't.
Yeah, like if we're going like original series and Keane as the author, I think we're talking about up like around 75. But yeah, then there's all sorts of sort of spin-offs that go from there. And I watched Scooby-Doo cartoon like religiously as a kid also. As an adult, it's interesting because I really enjoy this as a genre, but I don't actually feel like I've read a ton. The main series that I've read are the Raymond Chandler books, where Philip Marlowe is the detective. The Big Sleep is like the real famous one, and it's the first one. And I kind of came to that because The Big Lebowski is heavily based on that, and The Big Lebowski is probably a top 3 movie for me. And so I've read most of those, and I really enjoy them. It is mostly different from what we're going to talk about today. They take place in Los Angeles, and there's this dichotomy between the like glamorous veneer on everything, the neon lights, the smoky cool bars, all of that, and underneath it there's just this like sleaziness there that Marlowe always sees. The beginning of The Big Sleep, he goes, and it's this really large, well manicured estate, and when you're there, you're just describing it, it feels like this would be like perfect home. And then once you go inside, it's like the the patriarch of the family is like on life support in this wheelchair and he's miserable, and then all the family members are all messed up on drugs and alcohol and like trying to keep all this shit covered up. So like that's what he's always seeing, and that I like that dichotomy, and I think it's pretty cool. And I think he feels like this almost enlightened knight type of figure that is able to move through all of this debauchery, you know?
I need to read those because I remember I watched the Bogart movie, and it's fantastic.
Ooh, I should see it.
You haven't seen it? Oh yeah. Especially since I didn't even realize there was a book connected to it.
Yeah.
But yeah, no.
Really, really good.
Okay,
Yeah.
perfect.
Yeah.
I'll really enjoy those.
So why don't you tell us, what are we discussing today?
All right, here's the big reveal. It's Silver Street by E. Richard Johnson. So Silver Street was published in 1968, and it won the Edgar Allan Poe Award for Best First Novel. The Poe Award is given to crime and detective and suspense novels. Also in contention that year, there's only one other book, The Dinosaur by Lawrence Camarque. I've never heard of this, but sounds interesting. It's a novel about a man who becomes obsessed with a missing scientist and an inexplicable fossil discovery.
I'm reading that.
Yeah, I'm curious.
Did you do a one sentence?
Did.
Let's hear it.
I did.
Let's hear it.
Okay. Silver Street is a raw, gritty, and heartfelt story about pimps, prostitutes, and the cops that love them.
Man, I like that. Okay. I have worlds apart from where your favorite crime novels take place, where the glamorous veneer has already worn away, if it were ever even there to begin with. A world of cynicism and moral ambiguity is laid bare.
Solid.
Yeah.
More semicolons, I assume.
Oh, yeah. You know it.
Mm-hmm.
Really making use of commas as well. Okay, so 1969. Well, actually, what do you want? Do you want to tell us about E. Richard Johnson first, or do you want to tell us about 1969 first?
Let's talk about 69.
Yeah.
And then we can go in and I'll tell you about Johnson. There's a lot to tell. He's an interesting dude.
Yeah.
So 69 was a big year. A lot of us have heard of it because a lot of crazy things were happening that year. I think most pertinent to this story was Vietnam. It was raging on. The most notable battle of this year was Hamburger Hill, which I don't know a ton about, but it's one of those that, like, the name is just, it's very evocative. Also, we had the moon landing. Woodstock was in 69. The Stonewall riots were in 69. The Manson murders. I mean, this is all, even one or two of these things in a year would be notable. And very excitingly, Sesame Street had its first episode. Of course, in the midst of all of this, our author was in the middle of a long prison sentence. So he didn't get to experience all of this, but I'm sure it filtered in through the papers.
I had one more thing about 1969. Famously, I believe Bryan Adams got his first real six string down at the Five and Dime.
Who? I know that name. Who's Bryan Adams?
It's a song. It's called The Summer of 69. And for some reason, it just came into my head when you said it.
That's a very important event. Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So you just teased it a little bit. So E. Richard Johnson is in a prison cell while this is all going on. Why don't you tell us a little bit about him?
Let's rewind and cue the rewind noise effect. Johnson, he grew up in Wisconsin. He's a Midwesterner. He served in the Army in the later half of the 50s. After that, he worked in various jobs. This is all before his prison sentence. He's worked in logging, oil rigs. He was a powder monkey. He was a ranch hand. As he put it, he was never staying in one place longer than the time it took to collect enough money to go on the bum again. So he was a born adventurer. And of course, as with all great adventures, he got into a life of crime. During the 60s, he did stick-ups for 2 years. And then he got caught. There was somebody died in one of those stick-ups. And they got him for 40 years on armed robbery and murder. Yeah. So, yeah, tough sentence there.
Yeah, I mean, second degree murder from what I read. You know, when we're talking about murder, it's still pretty hardcore, right?
Yeah, right. Yeah, second degree. So that means it wasn't intentional, right?
Right, yeah, exactly. Yeah, it wasn't premeditated.
So while he was in prison, he took up writing as a way to pass the time. And he found there was lots of source material in prison. A lot of things to draw on, and it sounds like it helped keep him kind of sane. Silver Street was his first novel. It was published in 1968. But leading up to that, it was actually discovered in this slush pile by a very prolific mystery and suspense editor, Joanne Kahn, or Joan Kahn. Listeners, please correct me. And it went on to win the Edgar. And I just want to talk about Joanne Kahn for a second. She's an interesting figure. She's one of several pioneering female editors of that era, especially in this mystery and suspense genre. There were a couple who were prolific in bringing out a lot of the books that we know from that era. She was renowned for publishing suspense novels in particular, and she even had her own imprint, which not too long after this became known as the Joanne Kahn book. So you got to be good to get your own name. I don't think this was even her first Edgar. Also, interestingly, Kahn and Johnson didn't actually meet until a year after the book won the Edgar. Before that, they had just been corresponding via mail, not email. They didn't have that back then.
Right.
Yeah.
That actually is something I was thinking about. And of course, not that being in prison for murder is a positive thing, right? But we're here to talk about the book and him as an author.
Yeah.
I was just imagining reading about, him talking about Kahn and keeping in touch and do all his correspondence. And I'm just imagining, I would just imagine that having a long prison sentence like that for a lot of people would feel like kind of like the end, and that it must really, he must have really felt this drive to be doing this, because it seemed, obviously it seems like it was a lot of effort on his part to be able to do this correspondence and to be writing all these letters and arranging to be able to make phone calls from time to time and doing all of this stuff. Not to mention just writing a manuscript and getting it in a place where it's ready to be sent out, I don't imagine that these things would even be easy for someone in prison today, never mind back then.
Yeah, enormous effort. I mean, it's also they don't have computers. This is all, I'm assuming, typewritten.
Yeah, that's what I was picturing as well.
I had a brief stint in sixth grade where I was typewriting my essays just to annoy my teacher, but you learn a lot about how to make mistakes.
Yeah, and that's one page or two, right?
Yes.
That's not super long book.
5 paragraphs. And short ones at that.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, but I like to imagine their first meeting where she accepted this award in his honor, right? And he brought the award is just this big ceramic bust of Edgar Allan Poe, and she brought it to the prison for him. It's crazy to think about, right?
Yeah, man, that's wild.
Yeah. So he was hailed popularly after this book came out as one of the most exciting crime fiction writers of the decade. And he actually produced a hit follow-up the next year, Mongo's Back in Town, which became a very popular TV movie. I'm curious to check that out after reading the book. I'm definitely reading the sequel to this. Yeah, so during this period, he wrote a lot. He wrote 7 books, but he started getting into drugs like a lot of famous people. As he puts it, by 1974, I was spending more time with drugs and less time with writing, and the drugs had become more important. He returned to prison in 1978 after a brief parole in which he had returned to a life of crime. In prison, he managed to get clean, and he began writing again by around 1985. He published several more novels with the help of Joanne Kahn. He'd gotten back in touch with her, but they didn't get much acclaim at all. A lot of people outside saw him as a has-been, washed up. I'm still curious to read him because I don't trust that. I think this guy's a great writer.
Yeah.
The end of the story is he was released from prison in 1992 after serving his entire sentence. They did not let him out on parole again, and he died 5 years later.
I mean, we're talking about a lot of troubled times when he was not in prison, and then it sounds like when he was in prison, he was, with the exception of that period of drugs, but again, like you said, to have that many published novels is, that's really impressive.
It's more than me.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so let's talk about Silver Street, the book.
Yeah, let's do it. I guess to kick things off, I really enjoyed this book. Its prose, the writing was just so concise. There's just he's got this way with words. It's very clipped and staccato, and you can totally feel for me, I just kept imagining those old Bogart movies where there's that kind of deep voiceover, and it's a very noir feel, and it's raw. There's a raw emotionality, and he doesn't pull any punches for the audience. And his background really lends a lot of truth and veracity to this. What about you? What was your takeaway here?
Yeah, totally. I really agree with you. I I think there is, when I picture this type of novel, I sort of picture like, okay, we're getting some sort of like setting that is like glamorous, or that they're like, again, like a Gilded Age kind of vibe. Like there is something over this, and these things are happening under the surface. And I mean, this novel is just not that way. We are talking about an area where you would not feel very comfortable walking at night. And that is different from a lot of crime novels. And it was very tense. And it was also depressing, but not in a way that looked down on anybody. You know, I feel like maybe because he does have the experience of being involved in crime and being around criminals, you do feel like you kind of get to know everyone involved in the story. Yeah, but it feels just like really very like tense. It feels very claustrophobic almost, like everyone's living in these tiny apartments, and the street just feels like you just imagine feeling like you're like suffocating all the time when you're on the strip where Silver Street is, you know? And I really like that. That really worked for me.
That's a great point. There's no veneer of civilization in this. It's all open. It's all out in the open.
Right. It almost feels like in some other crime novels, sometimes there's corruption or whatever that's sort of allowing it to be facilitated, but you get the sense on this strip where Silver Street is, that it is just like one of those neighborhoods where like the police aren't really going unless there's like shots fired, or unless something is going down that they need to be there for, right? Because it's understood that there's crime happening there.
Yeah, exactly. How did you feel about the story itself?
So there's a few things I liked about it. I really, first of all, the protagonist I really like. His whole origin story to me is really interesting, and I think it makes for some really interesting dynamics between he and his boss at work. Also interesting dynamics between, you know, what like when he's out policing on Silver Street. You know.
Yeah, and to be clear for the audience, I think we can tell them this.
Yeah, okay. Yeah.
Lanto grew up here. He was a street rat. He was in the gangs, and then he turned to the police eventually. And you get all of that background on him and his thinking about that. And it just feels very realistic.
Yeah, totally. And I think especially when you consider the fact that this was written by someone who was incarcerated, right? Like I don't feel like I got a sense that there was any animosity towards the police or towards the people who are solving the crimes. I feel like in a lot of ways they are treated the same way as the people who are involved in the crime, and I really like that, because I think especially, again, where this is taking place, I don't feel like there is, you know, it seems like a lot of these crimes are like crimes of circumstance.
Yeah, and, like they're all caught in they're in a system where they have to do what they can to survive, and they're making what feel like the best choices, a lot of these people.
Right. And I also really like the switching of POVs. I feel like that's something, at least in the crime novels I've read, that's something that's hasn't really been part of it. And that added a lot of layers to the story. I just like that as a conflict and tension builder anyways. I like the idea that like, okay, well, I know something already, and now I'm with this other character and I'm getting things filled in. And I also know that they're thinking something, but like I already know about that from the other character. You know, I love that in, you know, I think we read a lot of fantasy and that's happening all the time in fantasy, but I just love that in any kind of story.
Yeah. I mean, I've read a lot of POV switching in fantasy, and these were some of the most fleshed out POVs from very contrary characters with very opposing perspectives that I have read. They all felt like real whole people. You know, this book opens with a pimp standing in the rain, and his feet are getting soaked, and he's in a bad mood, can't light a cigarette. And you're just like, oh man. And then he starts casually talking about these awful things he's going to do as if it's totally normal. And in his world it is. So you're struck with both empathizing for this poor soul who's just out in the rain doing his job, and then horror at what he's talking about doing. It's really great. I actually have a quote before we move on from this.
Yeah.
Talking about his writing of these characters. Johnson said, "I wanted both the criminals and the policemen to be real. Criminals who a reader could understand, and policemen who sometimes found it difficult to live up to the image of their jobs. Being objective with my characters was not difficult. I have known both criminals and cops that I liked and respected."
There you go. Yeah. One other thing I would say about the story is a lot of mysteries, you know, like certainly the the Marlowe mysteries and Agatha Christie for sure, where that sort of almost feels like a puzzle that you're figuring out. For a lot of them, and this is probably partly why you don't get POV switching, the mystery is the point, right? Like you are going and you are going to figure out who it is, right? Like when they take the mask off the person in Scooby-Doo.
That's true. That's a very good point.
Yeah, but in this case, we know who's committing these murders pretty early on in this book, and that was a different way to write it, right? And this is why I'm thinking of this more as a crime novel than a mystery novel, but there's a lot of overlap there. I liked that actually because that was another interesting POV, and I feel like having the story unfold from all these angles ended up being more interesting to me than if it was, fewer perspectives, and then we were going to find out who it was at the end, if that makes sense.
It's not exactly the same vibe, but have you seen the Columbo mysteries with Peter Falk?
I've seen a couple.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So in those, you know who the murderer is basically from the start. And the story is a sort of two-part story about Columbo, the detective, figuring out who it is. And he's hunting this guy down and trying to figure out how to trap him. And the other guy, you get his perspective often about trying to trick the detective. And so it becomes this cat and mouse thing, but you get both sides of it.
Yeah.
And this is much more brutal and dark.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
But still.
I'm glad you beat me to the punch on it, but noir was, I can't even, oh my God, noir was kind of like the word I had in mind as well for like, just like the vibe of this.
Oh yeah. I don't think it's raining the whole book, but the book has the energy of like it's just pouring rain all the time.
Yeah, whenever it was outside or people were coming in from outside, like in the apartment buildings, I was either picturing rain or I was picturing like ridiculously oppressive humidity. Like, you know what I mean? So we've touched on it a little bit, but just what, if any, more thoughts do you have about the way he wrote these characters and how these characters read for you?
Man, I don't know what else I could say about it.
Yeah.
I just think they were really, really like, I always love a good anti-hero.
Yeah.
And in this you get anti-heroes and anti-villains, if that makes sense. You get people who are just very rounded. You get people doing objectively horrible things, these pimps and how they treat the women who work with them. So they're, villains, but you also empathize with some of the things they're going through in the system they're trapped in. And then you get like Lanto, the cop, who he's the hero of the story in many ways, right? But, I don't agree with everything he says and thinks.
Yeah. For sure.
I don't agree with all his attitudes.
For sure. I think one character, I mean, there's a couple, but one character I really appreciated in this was Violet, which was, it's like a character foil to Lanto, essentially. Like Lanto is this cop who has kind of worked his way up to detective, and he's from Silver Street.
Oh, yeah.
And his boss has all of these like preconceived notions about him because he's Italian, right? We hear the word Dago a lot for the way his boss thinks of him. And Violet is the opposite. Violet is this cop who is there because his dad was a cop, and so he didn't have to earn his spot. And early in this book, he makes detective, and he's now working with Lanto. And I was really grateful to have his POV because I feel like because Lanto is so comfortable in Silver Street, and that's where he's from, and so a lot of these things are normal to him. Violet is freaking out when he is doing this police work, man. He is hoping for his retirement to come. He's regretting the fact that he even made detective. He's like, oh, I have to go interview these sex workers, and he's like afraid of doing that. It seemed like he was just like trying to stay afloat the whole time just because of where he was and the fact that he's dealing with these murders. So just to see him like clearly having never been exposed to that growing up or having these easy beats always throughout his career and now being thrown into this, that sort of helped us realize that like, oh no, this is pretty rough. Lanto, this is just like what Lanto knows. So that's why he's so calm about it, That's
a great point. It helps the audience better process this. That's the closest we get to any sort of veneer of civilization or civilized society is Violet coming from a place where none of this happens.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So I haven't heard the word Dago in a long time. My dad he used to play these tapes in the car that I'd listen to, these great stories from Gene Shepherd. Have you ever heard of them?
That name sounds familiar, but
Yeah.
I can't think anything specific.
They were, I want to say, stories from the 50s or 60s. And he was like a radio storyteller or something. I got to look him up later now. I'm thinking of him. But he had one called Ludlow Kissel and the Dago Bomb that struck back. I just look it up. And it's I don't remember anything else but the Dago Bomb that really stuck in my brain.
Man.
And as an Italian American, I can say that. I can own that word.
So there's another, so again, so this book, and I think we can maybe talk about it when we do the review at the end,
Yeah.
Again, this was written in the 60s and I had a weird experience. So my grandparents on my other side, not the side that you and I are on, but the other side, grew up in Chicopee in Western Mass. And back when they were growing up, Chicopee was predominantly French Canadians and Polish people. And my Pepe, he had this whole thing with his friends where it was like back and forth. Like the Polish people would talk about the frogs and they would have all these jokes about the frogs. And French people, Pepe would have all these jokes about Polacks, right? And obviously like this is not okay and this is not appropriate, but he comes from, I mean, he was a great man. He's been dead for over 20 years. But I can just remember going, to dinner or whatever with him in the car and being a little kid and he's nonstop just like, Nikki, how many Polacks does it take to screw in a light bulb? And I'm laughing at the joke because I don't know. I have the concept at that time. I don't even think I know what Poland is. Never mind that like we have jokes about people of Polish descent. Like that's just not something. I feel like that's not in our culture right now, which is a good thing. So I think I was just picturing like a Polak is like a funny cartoon character or something, right?
Oh yeah.
But Polak is used quite a few times in this book, and it is such a like that's a slur, that's not okay. But it made me feel like weirdly sentimental for being a little kid and hearing my grandfather say these things, which it was very strange, very strange.
Yeah. No, this book is definitely not for the faint of heart when it comes to slurs and graphic imagery.
Yeah.
But that's so fun. It's fun. So my wife is Polish. And,
yes.
And I've since learned a bit of Polish. And to say I am Polish is, in Polish, you say jestem Polaka. So Polak, it's literally a Polish word. Though related to that, I had my own experience with this kind of slurs as a child. I picked up an old joke book at a tag sale for kids, one of these old ones from like the 70s, and had a whole section on Irish jokes, like a whole chapter. Man. And I thought, as a kid, these are the best jokes. I don't know who these Irish people are, but man, they are funny. I told them to my parents nonstop. They would hide the book, but I would always find it. And eventually, the parents, bless their hearts, they sat me down and were like, Sam, you can't say that stuff. You got to stop.
Yeah.
It's not. They explained to me about racism, and then I understood. But the problem is, the jokes were still good outside of the racial element, and I wish I still had that book so I could reframe the jokes as that are not,
right in a way. Yeah.
In a way that's like, acceptable to modern society.
Yeah. If it's just like if you just told it about a person, then it would be funny still because like the underlying concept is funny, right? Yeah, 100%.
Exactly.
Yeah, and that's what was happening with me when I was laughing. Like, I didn't know what a Polak was, but anybody doing the things in his joke was funny. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah, 100%.
Before we get to our rating, I just have to say this book is hazardous to be carrying around in public, man. It's just like, I know this is an audio medium here, but okay, I can see we're holding it up. We both have the same edition. I mean, we've got, just so our readers can picture this, we've got a drawn woman who I assume is a sex worker based on the story and the image here and how she's dressed, built like Jessica Rabbit or something. And we see her from behind. Her butt is like right center. And then in front of her is a guy in a suit lying face down with a knife in his back. It's like, It's like got extreme violence and also like has the look of like, like an erotic novel or something, to the point that like my wife saw it and she was like, "What are you reading?" And like with my kids, I keep it face down, but I'm reading it for the podcast. And so like, anywhere I go, I'm just very mindful of where the front cover is. You know what I mean?
I had a friend here who saw it say, "That looks like something my grandpa kept under his bed."
Yes, it really does. And you know what? First thing, when my wife asked me, I turned it around for her and I said, "Look, it says Edgar Winter on it."
It won an award. It won an award, I promise.
Whenever I see that, I also, for whatever reason, think of Edgar Winter in my head. But yeah, so anyways, that's just, this is, in many ways, I feel like this book is of another time. But
it is very much of another time.
Yeah, but I did really enjoy it. Okay, so we need to give this book a rating and then make our recommendations. So how would you rate this book on a scale of 1 to 5 busts of Edgar Allan Poe?
I mean, I got to give it 5. I can't be the critic who just rates everything 5, but so far it's all 5. I really like this book. It's just a really fun book. The story is nothing new. It's fairly straightforward in a lot of ways, but the way it's told is brilliant, and I love the writing. So yeah, how about you?
Yeah, I would also give it 5 Edgar busts. For a lot of the same reasons. I feel like it just it checks a lot of boxes for me that are really important. Like you said, that like I really like the writing. I think the writing is really evocative. The fact that we get all of these different POVs and this tension kind of builds from all these different directions actually makes it better than other crime novels I've read. For me, it was really, really enjoyable. I almost, it's very different, but I almost feel like came away almost feeling similar to like when you watch The Wire and, you have this story where it's like, who are the good guys? Who are the bad guys? Exactly like Johnson said, there's criminals and cops both that he respects greatly. It's just all laid out in a way that feels very realistic. And in a way that a lot of crime and mystery novels don't. And so for me, it was great. I loved it. Would I recommend that everyone listening to this go out and get it? Not so much, right? I mean, I think there's a few things. We've already touched on the fact that there's some racism involved, right? There's a lot of Dago. There's a lot of Pollock. Like, obviously, we have this sex market going on, right? Like this market for sex. And so the way that the pimps, especially in their internal monologues, think about the women, the way that they treat the women is upsetting, right? And I can see that being triggering for a lot of people. So I don't necessarily think this is a novel that is going to be everyone's cup of tea.
Yeah. I completely agree. If violence and racial slurs and sex work is going to bother you, this is not the book for you. But if you're willing to stomach that, it's really a fantastic piece.
Yeah. I have the sequel now, so.
Oh boy.
And the cover is much safer than this one, so I'll reread it eventually.
All right. Yeah, let me know how it is. I got to read that too.
Yeah.
All right.
All right. Anything else before we switch to the spoiler cast?
No, let's switch on over. Oh, we should talk about what book we are reading next.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, so for our next new book, we will be doing my pick, which is The Gods Themselves by Isaac Asimov. And that won both the Hugo and Nebula, one in 1972 and one in 1973. Obviously, we've done a couple lesser known ones here for our first two. I think when most people hear Asimov, they think Foundation. So I don't know that this book itself is necessarily super well known, but certainly he's a household name as far as science fiction authors goes. But I'm excited. I'm looking forward to it.
Me too. Yeah, I've just started it, and I saw in his forward to it, he hadn't written sci-fi for I want to say 5-7 years before he wrote this book. He had taken a long break. Yeah. And it was just meant to be a short story on a dare, and it became a book. So I'm really curious to see where that goes.
Yeah. All right. So if you read Silver Street, we'll see you on the spoiler cast. If not, then we'll see you next time.
All right. Thank you all.
Bye.